The job posting didn't mention a power plant at first. It said, Site Maintenance Coordinator, remote location, 12-week contract, room and board included, $18 per hour. I was 3 months behind on rent and living in my sister's spare bedroom. I applied the same day. The interview was a phone call. A man named Garrett, who identified himself as operations supervisor, asked me 3 questions. Could I follow written instructions precisely? Had I ever worked nights? Did I have any aversion to being alone for extended periods? I said yes to all 3. He hired me on the spot. The drive took 8 hours from the city. Highway, then state road, then county route, then a gravel access road that climbed into low mountains. The landscape changed, gradually suburbs to exurbs to farmland to forest. By the time I turned onto the final access road, I hadn't seen another vehicle for 40 minutes. The power plant emerged from the trees like a failed monument. 3 cooling towers, in a row, all concrete and rust. A main building, brick and steel, with a smokestack that tilted slightly to the left. Behind it, a secondary structure I later learned was the decom staging area. The whole complex sat in a clearing maybe 40 acres across, ringed by pine forest, chain-link fence, most of it still standing. The gatehouse had a booth but no gate. It was late afternoon, late October. The air was cold and still. I parked in the marked lot and grabbed my duffel. Garrett met me outside the main entrance, a man in his 60s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered skin that comes from years working outdoors. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't unfriendly. He extended a calloused hand. "Welcome," he said. "I'm going to walk you through this carefully. Pay attention." We went inside. The lobby was cooler than outside, and dim. Most of the windows were sealed with plywood. Our footsteps echoed. Garrett led me down a hallway to a small office, his office, I assumed, and gestured to a metal filing cabinet. "Your keys are in here," he said. He opened a drawer and withdrew a ring with 7 keys on it. They were old, brass, each one labeled with tape: north door, south door, supply, office, residential, basement, and emergency. He handed them to me. The weight of them was substantial. "These are the only copies," he said. "You lose them. You don't leave this building until I bring new ones. That could take 2 days. Understood?" "Understood." He pulled out a folder thick, maybe 200 pages, mostly worn at the edges. "This is the Site Operations Manual. It contains everything you need to know. You're going to read it cover to cover before your first shift. It's not a suggestion." He set it on the desk in front of me. "Your shift is nights," he continued. 2200 to 600, that's 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Every night, no variation. You'll sleep during the day in the residential quarters. There's a cot, a small kitchen, a bathroom. You have access to the break room in the office. You do not have access to the reactor chamber, the turbine hall, the lower basement, or any area marked with a red X on the site map. Those are structural hazards. "Why not?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "The manual has a section called Restricted Areas. Read it." He paused. "There are also rules. They're in the manual. They're not negotiable. They were developed by the previous team over the course of several years. They work. You follow them exactly, and you'll be fine." "What happens if I don't follow them?" Garrett looked at me for a long moment. "You read the manual," he said finally. "Then we can talk about specifics. But I'll tell you now, the previous site coordinator quit. He was a good man, smart, but he didn't follow one of the rules. We don't know which one. We haven't been able to contact him in 9 months." The room felt colder. "That's not a threat," Garrett added, and something in his tone suggested it wasn't. "It's a fact. The rules are there for a reason. You follow them. You work here for 12 weeks. You go home with $4,500 and nothing worse than some missed sleep. You don't follow them, I don't know what happens to you. But I know it's not good." He stood up. "Let me show you your quarters." The residential wing was a short walk down a sealed corridor. Garrett had to unlock 2 doors to get there: the north door, which led to the administrative section, and another labeled Staff Access. The corridor itself was painted white, though the paint was yellowed and water-stained in places. Fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, and about half of them were burned out. Our footsteps sounded very loud. The residential quarters were basically a motel. 4 rooms, each about 12 feet by 12 feet, with a single bed, a small desk, a locked storage locker, and a window that didn't open. My room was the 3rd one. Garrett gave me the key labeled residential. "Water is fine," he said. "Electricity is on backup generators. They run automatically. If the power cuts out, that's not your concern. It happens maybe once a month, usually brief. There are flashlights and batteries in your locker. Don't leave your light on during the day. The standby power costs money." I set my duffel on the bed. "Meals are in the break room. There's a small refrigerator. You can use it. Meals are also in the manual. Prepared food is stored on site. Nothing fancy. Sandwiches, canned goods, some dried fruit. You won't go hungry." He moved to the window and pulled down a shade made of thick, dark fabric. It sealed out all the light. "Keep this down at night. It reduces glare on the glass." "Why does that matter?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Any other questions?" I wanted to ask several. Instead, I said, "What's the emergency phone number?" "There isn't one," he said. "Your site radio has a dedicated channel. If there's an actual emergency fire, injury, structural collapse, you use that. But you won't need to. Nothing like that happens. Mostly the job is just monitoring systems and following the checklist." He moved to the door. "I'll leave you to settle in. Dinner is at 7. I'll meet you in the break room. We'll go over the manual tonight. Your first shift starts at 10. He left me alone. The room smelled like dust and something else I couldn't identify. Old plastic, maybe, or old time. I sat on the bed and looked at the site operations manual. The cover was brown, the binding reinforced with duct tape. The title was printed in black letters: Site Operations Manual. Decommissioned Thermal Power Plant Unit 7. Revised edition, March 2019. March 2019. That was 5 years ago. I opened it. The first section was standard stuff: facility history, decommissioning timeline, equipment inventory, safety protocols. The power plant had been operational from 1978 to 2014. It had been decommissioned in phases over the next 5 years. Now, in 2024, it was maintained in a safe state by a skeleton crew. That was me. The duties section was clear: nightly patrol of the main building, visual inspection of the cooling tower integrity, monitoring of backup generator systems, recording of temperature and humidity readings, maintenance of the perimeter fence, removal of any debris or animal remains from the site grounds. Standard stuff. I was starting to relax when I reached the section marked Operational Rules. It was a numbered list, starting at 1 and ending at 13. I read it twice before I understood what I was looking at. 1. Between the hours of 2:15 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., all windows on the western side of the building must be covered with opaque material. After 2:30 a.m., all covers must be removed immediately. This is non-negotiable. Failure to adjust covers at the proper times will result in immediate termination and non-payment. 2. Radio checks must be conducted every 30 minutes on channel 6. The check consists of 1 key press for active and 1 key press for standby. Vocalizations are permitted but not required. Channel 7 is not to be monitored. If Channel 7 transmits during your shift, do not respond. Do not acknowledge the transmission. Do not deviate from Channel 6 checks. 3. The supply closet accessed via the key, labeled Supply, contains certain chemical substances in sealed containers. These are for boundary maintenance only. The containers are not to be opened, and the boundary must be maintained every night at the following locations: the north side of the main building, a distance of 30 yards out; the south side, 40 yards; the east side, 35 yards. These must be completed between the hours of 23 and midnight. If the boundary cannot be maintained on any given night, radio Channel 6 to report. Do not attempt to re-establish a boundary the following night. Contact me directly. 4. Room 7, in the basement level, is not to be entered under any circumstances. If you hear sounds emanating from Room 7, ignore them. If you see movement beyond the door marked Room 7, ignore it. If you are called to Room 7 by name, do not respond. Do not unlock the door. Do not investigate. Report the occurrence to me the following morning, Under no circumstances enter room 7, 5. The maintenance corridor that runs the length of the east wall is to be inspected visually every night at 0130. You are not to speak while in the maintenance corridor. You are not to use a radio while in the maintenance corridor. You are to walk the full length of the corridor one time, only. You are to spend no more than 4 minutes in the corridor. If you see anything that does not match the description in Appendix B, Maintenance Corridor Contents, Baseline, note it and report it the following morning. Do not investigate. Do not touch. Do not deviate from the 4-minute time limit. 6. Between 22:30 and 23:15, you are to remain in the office area or the break room. You are not to be in the corridors during this time window. You are not to be in the basement. You are not to be on the exterior grounds. This is a firm boundary. If you are in a corridor during this window, proceed to the nearest staffed area immediately. 7. There is a mirror in the bathroom attached to the office. This mirror is not to be used between the hours of 22:30 and 00:30. The mirror is covered during these hours with a cloth. Do not remove the cloth. Do not look at the mirror. Do not wash your hands in the office bathroom during this window. Use the residential quarters bathroom instead. 8. Do not open any window in the building. Windows are to remain sealed. If you notice a window has been opened, close it, seal it, and report the occurrence to me immediately. 9. Inventory of the supply closet is to be conducted every day at 01:45 exactly. The contents are to be counted and recorded on the attached sheet. The sheet is to be filed in the office. If any item is missing, do not replace it. Report the deficiency immediately. 10. If you receive a phone call, do not answer it. The building has a landline connected to an external line. If it rings, do not pick it up. Let it ring. It will stop. If it rings more than 6 times before stopping, call me. This is urgent. 11. The south door and the north door have locks that are old. They are prone to unlocking if not checked regularly. Every 2 hours, beginning at 2300, check both doors. Ensure they are locked. If either door is unlocked when it should be locked, lock it and report the incident to me. Do not investigate how it became unlocked. 12. If you hear a voice outside calling your name, do not respond. Do not go to the window. Do not investigate. This is not a real call. Continue your duties. 13. The perimeter fence is to be walked at 00:45. You are to check for breaches, damage, or animal incursions. You are to walk the entire perimeter, a distance of approximately 1,200 yards. You are to complete the perimeter walk in under 30 minutes. You will be able to hear the north cooling tower from most of the walk. The sound is normal and should be ignored. Any other sounds should be noted. If the perimeter is breached, or if you observe a dead animal of significant size near the fence line, report it immediately upon entering the building. I read through the list 3 more times. I didn't understand most of it. The rules made no sense. Why did windows need to be covered at specific times? What was the boundary maintenance with chemical substances? What did it mean that a phone call wasn't a real call? But I thought about Garrett's words. The previous coordinator had broken one rule. He wasn't contactable. Had he disappeared? Had something happened to him? I closed the manual and sat on the bed, listening to the building settle around me. Outside my sealed window, the forest was going dark. In a few hours, I'd have to start following these rules. I'd have to walk corridors and check locks and spray some kind of chemical boundary around the building. I'd have to ignore voices and mirrors and phone calls. I'd have to trust that the rules worked. Dinner was at 7. The break room was small, a table for 4, a stove, a refrigerator, some cabinets. Garrett had brought sandwiches and coffee. We ate in near silence. When we finished, he walked me through the critical parts of the manual again, emphasizing certain rules more than others. The window coverage is the most time-sensitive, he said. 2:15 to 2:30. You need to set a timer. Don't guess at the time. The covers are hanging on the back wall of the storage closet. You'll install them, then remove them at 2:30 sharp. Not 2:29, not 2:31. 2:30. Why? I asked. Because that's when the rule changes, he said flatly. I don't have an explanation beyond that. I just know that if the windows are covered after 2:30, bad things happen. and if they're not covered before 2:15, other bad things happen. What kind of bad things? He looked at me. The previous coordinator found out. He's not available to discuss it with you. We went over the other rules in detail. The boundary maintenance was critical. I'd be using a substance called ammonium sulfate in a diluted solution. I was to spray it in a line around the specified distances from the building. The chemical smelled terrible and would mark the perimeter visibly. It's a deterrent, Garrett said, to certain types of intrusion. What types? The kind you don't want to encounter. The radio checks had to be precise. Channel 6, every 30 minutes. Key press. Listen for the repeater to confirm reception, then stand by. Never use voice unless absolutely necessary. Never acknowledge Channel 7 under any circumstances. What transmits on Channel 7? I asked. Things that aren't what they sound like, he said. That's all you need to know. The maintenance corridor inspection was important too. Appendix B had photographs of the corridor in its baseline state, empty, relatively clean, with pipes and electrical conduits running along the walls. I was to verify that everything in the corridor matched these photographs. If something was out of place, I noted it but did nothing else. How would something get out of place? I asked. Garrett didn't answer. By the time we finished, it was 9:45. I felt like I'd been studying for an exam. I didn't understand. My head was full of times and distances and incomprehensible rules. You'll do fine, Garrett said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Your job is to be precise and obedient. Do that, and the rest takes care of itself. He left at 10 o'clock. I watched him drive away in his truck, and then I was alone. The building shifted into night mode around me. Lights that had been on automatically dimmed. The HVAC system quieted. I could hear the hum of the backup generators out back, a steady electrical thrum beneath everything. I set my watch timer and began my shift. The first night was mostly uneventful, which I think was the point. The rules seemed designed to create a structure, a framework of adherence that would become automatic. Follow the structure, and nothing happens. Break the structure, and something does. At 11 o'clock, I began my first patrol. I walked the main corridors of the building, checking doors and windows, looking for anything amiss. The building was strange in the dark. Fluorescent lights in some sections, nothing but emergency red glow in others. The walls seemed to absorb sound. My footsteps didn't echo the way they did during the day. They seemed to get swallowed by the corridors themselves. I checked the north door at 11 and found it locked. Checked it again at 1 o'clock. Still locked. At 11:45, I was outside with the spray bottle, carefully measuring out 30 yards from the north side of the building. The forest was black beyond the clearing. I could hear wind in the trees, and something else, a distant mechanical sound, probably the cooling towers. I sprayed the boundary in a thin line, watching the white-colored chemicals settle onto the grass. It smelled like rotten eggs and rust. 40 yards on the south side, 35 on the east. I completed the boundary maintenance by midnight, as required. At 1:30, I came back inside to prepare for the window coverage. The storage closet was in a back hallway. Inside were several long panels of heavy fabric, each one attached to a frame of PVC pipe. They were awkward to carry but not heavy. I hauled them to the western side of the building and set about installing them over the windows. It was a simple process. Each panel hung from hooks already installed above the windows. Install, align, secure the bottom hooks. I had it done by 2 to 10. I sat in the break room and watched my watch count down. 2:15. I was ready. 2:20. Still waiting. 2:25. At 2:28, I stood up. At 2:29, I moved to the first window. At 2:30, I removed the panel. I did this 7 times, moving from window to window, removing each panel exactly as the clock hit 2:30. The whole process took 3 minutes. I had the panels unhooked and stacked before 2:35. Nothing happened. No sound, no movement, no sense of change, but something felt different in the building after those panels came down. The air felt lighter, or maybe I was just getting tired. At 1:45, I conducted my supply closet inventory. The items were simple. 12 containers of ammonium sulfate solution, 12 spray bottles, 6 batteries, AA, 4 flashlights, 3 boxes of salt, iodized, 6 boxes of matches, 1 first aid kit, 1 fire extinguisher, 1 logbook. I counted everything twice and recorded the inventory on the provided sheet. All items accounted for. I filed the sheet in the office and made a note in my personal notebook. At 1:45 exactly, 1:50. To be honest, because I was a bit slow, I made my way to the maintenance corridor. The door was marked with a simple label, Maintenance, Access, Personnel Only. The corridor beyond was roughly 8 feet wide, with pipes and conduits running along both walls and the ceiling. The baseline photographs showed it relatively clean, with the pipes in specific arrangements. Appendix B had measurements and notes about each section. I walked slowly, not speaking, not using the radio, my eyes moving systematically from left to right, checking each section against the photographs. The corridor ran about 150 yards, I estimated. My watch said I had been in there for 2 minutes and 15 seconds when I reached the halfway point. Everything matched the baseline. Pipes were in the right positions. No debris on the floor, no movement, no sounds other than the low hum of the building systems. I made it to the end of the corridor, turned around, and walked back. The return journey took me 1 minute and 40 seconds. Total time in the corridor, 3 minutes and 55 seconds, well within the 4-minute limit. I exited the corridor and immediately felt a weight lift. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath, but I was. The rest of the night was silence and routine. I checked the doors every 2 hours. I did my radio checks on Channel 6 every 30 minutes. The repeater always came back with a clean double beep confirming reception. Nothing happened at 2:20 or 2:30 except my diligent adherence to the rule. I heard no phone calls. I saw no movement in the sealed windows. The forest around the building remained black and static. At 6 o'clock, the sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky. I stood in the office and marked the end of my shift on the log sheet. 8 hours. All rules followed. All tasks completed. No incidents. I went to my room, sealed the window shade, and slept without dreams. The second night, I started to understand the rhythm of the place. The rules weren't random. They created a cycle of activity that moved through the building in a specific pattern. Every hour had something assigned to it. Every task was designed to keep me moving, keep me occupied, keep me aware of the building's systems and boundaries. More importantly, they kept me from certain places at certain times. Rule 6, the prohibition on being in corridors between 22:30 and 23:15 wasn't just arbitrary. It meant that particular time window was reserved for something else, something I wasn't supposed to encounter. On my third night, I started noticing small things. At 22:45, during the prohibited time window, I was in the break room when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. I froze, listening. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving down the hallway toward the west wing. They sounded heavy, like boots or heavy shoes. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped. I waited, but I heard nothing else. By 23:20, well after the prohibited window had ended, I cautiously opened the break room door. The corridor was empty. No one was there. I checked both doors north and south, and they were still locked. I made a note in my personal notebook but didn't report it to Garrett. I wasn't sure if the footsteps counted as an incident, and I didn't want to seem paranoid on only my third night. On the fourth night, I heard the phone ring. It was around 3, and I was in the office doing my inventory checks. The landline on the desk made a shrill, old-fashioned sound. Ring, ring, ring. I stared at it, remembering Rule 10. Do not answer it. Let it ring. It will stop. I counted the rings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the 7th ring, it stopped. Nothing happened. No message, no callback, no indication of who had called, just silence. But my heart was racing, and my hands felt cold. I waited an hour before continuing with my duties. That seemed wise. On the 6th night, I saw something that broke my calm. It was during my maintenance corridor inspection, around 1:45. I was halfway through the corridor, moving through the baseline inspection, when I noticed something on the floor. It was small, a piece of paper, folded into a tight square. It wasn't in the baseline photographs. Nothing on the floor was in the baseline photographs. I stopped. My timer said I'd been in the corridor for 1 minute and 50 seconds. I had time to investigate without breaking the 4-minute limit. I picked up the paper and unfolded it. It was a handwritten note. The writing was shaky, like it had been written by someone with trembling hands. It said, "Follow the rules exactly. Follow the rules exactly." The same phrase, repeated 4 times, filling the page. I folded it back up, set it on the floor where I found it, and finished my corridor inspection without deviating from my time limit. I did not touch it again. I did not report it to Garrett. I did not acknowledge what I'd seen. But something in the building had changed. Someone else was here. Or something had pretended to be someone once, leaving behind a message that might have meant nothing. On my 10th night, Garrett called me. "How are you holding up?" he asked. His voice crackled over the office line, a real phone call from a real person. "Fine," I said. "Everything is routine. I'm following all the rules. Any incidents?" I thought about the footsteps, the phone call, the note. None of them quite rose to the level of incident based on how Garrett had defined incidents. Incidents seemed to be breaches of the boundary, appearances of dead animals, or other concrete physical things. "No incidents," I said. There was a pause. "Good. Keep it that way. The rules aren't there to torture you. They're there to maintain a balance." "A balance with what?" "With the building's history," he said. "With what was here before. The power plant was operational for 36 years. A lot of energy moved through this place. A lot of heat and pressure and radiation. When we decommissioned it, we didn't just turn it off. We had to do it carefully. Had to make sure the energy didn't pool, didn't concentrate in certain areas." "What kind of energy?" I asked. "The kind you don't understand if you're not a physicist," he said. "The point is, the rules work. They keep things distributed. They keep things from accumulating. They maintain the boundary between here and there. Here and there, inside and outside, above and below, normal and other." He paused. "You'll understand eventually. For now, just follow the rules." "How many nights do you have left?" I calculated. I was 10 nights in. My contract was for 12 weeks, which was 84 nights. 74 to go. 74, I said. "You'll be fine," Garrett said. "And then it'll be someone else's problem. You'll be gone, and you won't have to think about this place again." He hung up. I sat in the office, looking at the phone, wondering if he actually believed what he'd just said. Could someone really just walk away from this place? Could you spend 84 nights following rules designed to contain something, and then just leave it behind? I didn't think so. I thought the rules never really let go of you. On my 15th night, my first real incident occurred. I was doing my routine patrol at 0:45 when I found that the south door was unlocked. I was sure I'd checked it at 23 and it was locked, 2-hour intervals, per Rule 11. This was my second check, and it was definitely, unmistakably, unlocked. The deadbolt was open. The door could swing inward. I locked it immediately, then locked it again just to be sure. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide if this was a real incident or some mechanical failure. The door locks were old. Garrett had mentioned they were prone to unlocking. I went back into the building and called Garrett. It was 01, 0 inches the morning, but he answered on the second ring like he was awake. "The south door was unlocked," I said. "It was locked at 23 and unlocked at 1. I locked it again." There was a long silence on the other end. "Did you investigate how it became unlocked?" he asked. "No, you said not to. Did you check the exterior of the building? Did you notice any breaches in the fence? Any disturbance in the chemical boundary?" I hadn't. I immediately regretted it. "I'll check now," I said. "Do it," he said. "Call me back when you're done." I hung up and grabbed a flashlight. I went outside and examined the south side of the building carefully. The boundary I'd sprayed the previous night was still visible as a white line in the grass. It hadn't been disturbed. The fence beyond it looked intact. I walked the perimeter around the first, south-facing side, looking for any sign of breach or disturbance. Nothing. Everything was undisturbed. I called Garrett back. "Nothing," I reported. "The boundary is intact. The fence is intact. No sign of incursion. Then the door unlocked from the inside, he said. That happens sometimes. The locks are old. Could be humidity. Could be temperature fluctuation. Could be just wear. Check it more frequently tonight. Every hour instead of every 2. And seal it with tape when you're not going to be using it. Tape? There's painter's tape in the supply closet. Use it to seal the door closed. It won't prevent it from unlocking, but it'll show you if someone has tried to open it. I did that. I sealed both the north and south doors with painter's tape, a thin line of tape running from the door frame to the door itself, positioned in a way that would break visibly if the door was opened. Then I resumed my patrol, checking the doors every hour. They all remained sealed and locked. But something had changed. The building felt more active. The air seemed to hold its breath differently. I found myself checking my watch more frequently, making sure I was exactly where I needed to be at exactly the right time. The rules weren't just guidelines anymore. They felt like walls. They felt like the only thing standing between me and something that didn't have a name. My 23rd night was when I first heard the voice. It was around 3:30, and I was doing my inventory check in the supply closet. I had just finished counting the spray bottles when I heard a voice from somewhere in the building. It was calling my name. David, David, can you hear me? It was a woman's voice. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I closed the supply closet and stood in the hallway, listening. The voice called again, more distant this time. David, I'm in the office. Can you come here? It sounded like my sister. My sister's name is Catherine. She's the one whose spare bedroom I'd left 3 weeks ago to come to this place. She was supposed to be in the city, 300 miles away, but the voice was unmistakably hers. I remembered Rule 12. If you hear a voice outside calling your name, do not respond. Do not go to the window. Do not investigate. This is not a real call. Continue your duties. The voice wasn't outside. It was inside the building. But the principle seemed the same. I continued walking down the hallway, ignoring the voice. It called again, from the office this time. David, I'm scared. Can you come? My heart was beating too fast. I wanted to go to the office. I wanted to check if my sister was actually there. But I knew, somehow, that if I did, something very bad would happen. Instead, I went to the break room and made my mandatory radio check on Channel 6. Key press. The repeater confirmed. Radio check complete. By the time I finished, the voice had gone silent. I sat in the break room for the rest of the night, doing my duties on schedule, but not straying from staffed areas. I did my maintenance corridor check exactly on time. I did my inventory at 1:45, but I avoided the office, avoided any place where the voice might call to me again. When dawn came, I was exhausted and anxious. I called Garrett at 6, exactly when I logged off shift. I heard a voice last night. I told him. It sounded like my sister. It was calling to me from inside the building. What did you do? He asked immediately. I ignored it. I continued my duties. Did the voice persist? No, it stopped. Good, he said. You did the right thing. That's Rule 12, or a variation of it. The building sometimes mimics voices. Sometimes it imitates people you know. The voices never bring anything good. You ignore them, and they go away. You acknowledge them or investigate them, and things get complicated. What kind of things? I asked. The kind you don't want to find out about, he said. You're doing well. Don't break your pattern now. Keep following the rules. How many nights left? 61, I said. You'll be fine. But I wasn't sure I would be. After that night, I started to see patterns in the rules that I hadn't noticed before. The rules weren't just about maintaining a boundary or preventing incursion. They were about controlling information. They prevented me from perceiving certain things. The covered windows between 2 to 15 and 2:30, what was happening outside that needed to be hidden. The mirror in the office covered until 12:30. What would I see if I looked at it during the prohibited time? The maintenance corridor inspection required silence and no radio use. Why? Was there something in that corridor that responded to radio signals? Was something down there that I wasn't supposed to hear? Most importantly, I started to understand that I wasn't alone in the building, but I was supposed to pretend I was. There were footsteps that I never saw originate from anyone. There were sounds in the basement during the day, but I never ventured down there to investigate. Once, I found a cup of coffee in the break room that was still warm, even though I was the only one on the property. I didn't mention it to Garrett. On my 35th night, the phone rang again. This time, I counted the rings more carefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It kept ringing past 6. Garrett had said if it rang more than 6 times, I should call him, but something about that instruction felt like a trap. If the phone was part of the system, if it was part of what lived here, then reporting it might be exactly what it wanted. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 11th ring, it stopped. I did not call Garrett. By my 40th night, I had fallen into a rhythm so complete that it felt like my entire life had always been this. The cycle of tasks, the specific times, the careful adherence to boundaries, it had become the only thing that made sense. I slept during the day, in my sealed room, and moved through the building at night like a ghost following a script. The routine had worn grooves into my thinking. Without the structure, I felt I would dissolve. But I was also beginning to understand something that the manual hadn't explicitly stated. The rules were getting tighter, or rather, my understanding of them was becoming more nuanced. Small transgressions that I hadn't thought much about earlier were starting to feel dangerous. On night 40, I realized I had deviated from the exact schedule for my maintenance corridor inspection by 30 seconds. I had been at 1:48 when I was supposed to be at 1:45. The previous night, I'd been at 1:42. The variation bothered me more than it should have. I started setting multiple timers to ensure precision. I began checking my watch obsessively. That same night, I noticed something new in the supply closet. A notebook bound in faded blue cloth, sitting on top of the chemical containers. I knew I had not seen it before. I was sure of it. I opened the notebook carefully. It was a log, handwritten in the same shaky script I'd seen on the note in the maintenance corridor. The entries covered multiple years' dates ranging from 2019 to 2023. Some entries were single sentences. Others were lengthy accounts of incidents and observations. The most recent entry was dated September 2023, 9 months before I'd arrived. It was written by someone named Marcus, according to the signature. It read, "I don't know why I keep writing this. No one is going to read it. Or maybe they will, and it will help them not make the mistakes I made. The rules work if you follow them exactly. But there's always a moment when you start to understand what they're really protecting you from, and that's when you want to break them. When you want to know. When you want to see what's on the other side of the rule. Don't do it. The moment you want to know is the moment you should leave." I wanted to know. I investigated the sound in the basement on the night of August 14th. I went down into room 7. There was nothing visible in room 7, but something was there. I could feel it. I spent 3 minutes in there before I came back up. 3 minutes. That was 43 days ago. I haven't been able to see my reflection since then. My wife doesn't know what happened to my face. I told her it was a medical condition. I'm leaving tomorrow. If you're reading this, you're probably wondering if I'm the coordinator who disappeared. I didn't disappear. I walked out the gate on September 15th, 2023. I'm in Boston now. I teach high school chemistry. I have a normal life. But I don't have a reflection. And, sometimes, in the dark, I can feel something looking at me from places where nothing should be able to look. Whatever is in this building, whatever is in that basement, it stays in the rules. The moment you leave the rules, the moment you acknowledge it outside the rules, you take it with you. The entry ended there. I read it 4 times, my hands trembling. I put the notebook back where I'd found it and tried to continue my shift normally, but I couldn't. The idea that the previous coordinator was still alive, that he had simply left and taken something with him, it changed everything. What did it mean to take something with you? What had he taken? And more pressingly, what if he was wrong? What if leaving the building meant the thing in the basement followed you to Boston, to wherever you went, to whoever you tried to become? I didn't sleep the next day. On my 42nd night, I made my first deliberate rule transgression. Not a major one, a small one, a test. Rule 7 stated that I was not to use the office bathroom between 22:30 and 0:30. The mirror was covered during those hours. The rule was to use the residential quarters bathroom instead. At 23:15, I went to the office bathroom and looked at the covered mirror. I could see the shape of my face through the dark fabric, distorted by the weave. I stood there for 10 seconds, just looking at the outline of my own reflection, hidden behind cloth. Nothing happened. The bathroom remained normal. The pipes didn't rattle. No sound came from the walls. I went back to my duties, feeling both relieved and deeply disappointed. On my 48th night, I broke the same rule again, but this time I didn't stop at looking. At 0:15, during the prohibited window, I reached up and pulled the cloth away from the mirror. For a moment, I saw my own face looking back at me. I looked terrible. I had lost weight. My eyes were sunk deep in my skull. My skin had taken on a grayish tone from weeks of sleeping during the day. I barely recognized myself. Then my reflection moved, and I didn't. My reflection smiled when I wasn't smiling. It tilted its head when I held mine still. It was me, and it wasn't me. It was something wearing my face like an ill-fitting suit. I pulled the cloth back over the mirror with a sound like a sob catching in my throat. I ran to the residential quarters and locked myself in my room. I didn't emerge until my shift ended at 6. I made no radio checks. I didn't do my patrols. I simply waited for dawn like a small animal waiting for danger to pass. When I called Garrett, I didn't mention what had happened. "Everything okay?" he asked, and I realized I must have sounded strained. "Fine," I lied. "Just tired." "You're past the halfway point now," he said. 42 nights down, 42 to go. You're over the hump." "It feels longer than halfway," I said. "It always does," he replied. "That's the nature of this place. Time moves differently here. Nights feel like weeks. But you're doing well. No incidents, no breaches. You're maintaining the boundary. Keep it up." After I hung up, I sat in the office and thought about Marcus in Boston, walking around with no reflection. How long had he lasted before the thing that followed him caught up? Or was it still following him? Would it always be behind him, in mirrors and still water and dark windows? I made a decision then. I would follow the rules perfectly for the remaining 42 nights. I would not break them again. I would not investigate, would not deviate, would not try to understand. I would simply endure until my contract ended, and then I would leave, and I would not think about this place ever again. It was a promise I made to myself. I almost believed I could keep it. On my 55th night, someone else arrived at the power plant. I didn't know how this was possible. My contract was exclusive. I was supposed to be alone on the site. But around 22:30, I heard a vehicle drive into the lot. I heard doors slam. I heard voices outside the building. Through a sealed window, I caught a glimpse of a truck and two figures, a man and a woman. They were carrying supplies. They looked like contractors. I checked the manual. There was nothing about other personnel being on site. I called Garrett immediately. "There are people here," I said. "Outside the main entrance. They just arrived." "That's fine," Garrett said. "They're contractors. They're going to be doing some exterior work on the cooling towers. 2 nights only. They'll be gone by midnight tomorrow." "They don't know the rules," I said. This seemed important for some reason. "They don't need to know the rules," Garrett said. "They're not staying. They're not subject to the same restrictions. Just avoid them. Stay inside. They'll be working on the exterior of the structures. You stick to the interior and do your normal duties. They won't interfere with you." He hung up. I stood in the office, trying to process this. The building had been sealed off, restricted, controlled for weeks. And now there were outsiders on the property. People who didn't know about the rules, who probably had no idea what the rules were protecting against. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt a growing sense of dread. At 23, I did my door checks and found both sealed and locked as always. At 23:45, I heard the contractors moving around on the exterior of the building. They were setting up some kind of scaffolding near the cooling towers. At 0, I began my routine boundary maintenance, and that's when I saw them up close. The male contractor was standing near the north boundary line, the one I had sprayed with the ammonium sulfate solution. He had a handheld GPS unit and was taking measurements. The female contractor was about 30 yards away, setting surveyor's marks. Neither of them seemed to notice the boundary line. Neither of them seemed to understand its significance. The male contractor actually stepped over it without hesitation. I watched from a distance, hidden by shadow, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. He stood on the other side of the boundary, on the wrong side, the outside side, and continued his work. Nothing reached out from the forest. Nothing emerged to claim him. Of course, nothing did. The boundary wasn't designed to keep things out. It was designed to keep things in. I completed my boundary maintenance routine, staying well back from the contractors. The male contractor never recrossed the boundary during my observation period. He remained on the outside, working with the GPS unit until nearly 1. That was when I noticed something else. There was a mark on his neck, a mark I could see even from 50 yards away in the darkness, visible because it seemed to catch and hold the ambient light. It was a symbol of some kind, a circle with marks radiating outward from it. And suddenly I understood. The contractors weren't outside the system, they were part of it. They had marks that meant something, symbols that indicated they belonged here in a way that I didn't. The boundary didn't apply to them because they weren't bound by it. They weren't prisoners, they were something else. I finished my rounds and stayed inside the building for the rest of the night. I avoided any area where I might see them through a window. I did my tasks on schedule and tried not to think about what I'd seen. At 6, when dawn broke, the contractors were still working on the cooling tower. By the time I emerged from the building at 6:30 to take measurements for my final log entry, they were loading their equipment back onto their truck. I got a closer look at the female contractor as she climbed into the cab. She turned her head just slightly, and I saw her eyes. They were wrong, too bright, too aware, looking at me in a way that suggested she could see more than just my physical form. She saw me seeing her. She smiled. The truck left at 6:45. I called Garrett at 7. The contractors left, I said. But before they did, I noticed they had marks on them, on their necks. Symbols. There was a very long silence on the other end. You weren't supposed to see that, Garrett said finally. What are they? They're not your concern, he said. They don't affect your role here. The rules you follow aren't the only rules that exist. There are other systems at work. Other people who maintain different aspects of the boundary. You don't need to know about them. Are they human? Garrett finished. Yes, probably. Or they were, once. But they've chosen a different path. They maintain aspects of the perimeter that are beyond what I've asked you to do. Don't worry about them. You won't see them again. How do you know that? Because this is their first visit in over a year, he said. Which means the boundary is stable. Which means you're doing your job well. Keep doing it, and you'll never have to see them again. 39 nights left, David. You can make it. He hung up. But I knew he was wrong. I would see them again, or rather, they would see me. They had already decided something about me, already marked me in some invisible way. I was no longer just a maintenance coordinator. I was something else, something that had to be monitored. My routine fractured after that night. Not obviously. I still did my patrols. I still checked my timers. I still followed every rule with mechanical precision. But something inside me had broken, and I couldn't quite put it back together. The building began to feel different around me, smaller in some moments, impossibly vast in others. Corridors that I had walked every night suddenly seemed to stretch longer. The maintenance corridor, which was roughly 150 yards on the baseline, suddenly felt like 300 yards the next time I walked it. My timer said I'd been in there for 4 minutes and 20 seconds, but my legs had only traveled maybe half the distance I was supposed to have covered. I didn't report it. On my 60th night, I heard voices in the basement, not calling my name, not mimicking anyone I knew. Just sounds, human sounds, talking in words I couldn't quite make out, coming from somewhere deep beneath the building. I could hear them most clearly from the office, as if they were traveling through the pipes and the ventilation system. They weren't aggressive. They weren't even particularly distressed. They just sounded like people talking. Like maybe there was a small group of them down there, having a conversation about something mundane. I tried to make out the words but couldn't. The voices continued intermittently throughout the night. Sometimes they were louder, sometimes they faded to almost nothing, but they were always there, in the background, like a distant radio someone had left on. On my 62nd night, I found a photograph on my bed. It was a Polaroid, the kind that was practically extinct now. It showed the interior of room 7 inches the basement. The room was empty, just concrete walls and a bare floor. But in the center of the floor was a symbol, the same symbol I'd seen on the contractor's neck. A circle with radiating marks. It was drawn in what looked like chalk, with impeccable precision. There was no indication of who had left the photograph or when. I checked my room's security. It had no lock, only my keycard access. Anyone with building credentials could have entered while I was on my shift. I burned the photograph in the office sink and flushed the ashes down the drain, but I couldn't unburning it from my memory. On my 65th night, Marcus called me. It was around 3, and I was doing my inventory in the supply closet when the office phone rang. Normally, I would ignore it per Rule 10, but something made me answer it. Maybe it was because I'd been expecting this. Maybe it was because I needed to know if what I'd read in his journal was really true. "Hello?" I said. "David." His voice was thin, stretched out, like it was traveling a very long distance. "I'm calling from Boston. I'm calling from about 60 years in the future. I'm calling because I have to. I'm calling because the thing that got me followed me to Boston, and then it followed me somewhere else, and now I don't know where I am. I'm calling because I need you to know that what you saw in the mirror was the real you. The you that got left behind when you first broke a rule. You have to keep following the rules, David. You have to follow them until the end of your contract, and then you have to walk out and leave all the versions of you that broke the rules behind. You have to leave them in this building. Do you understand?" His voice cracked on the last word. "Marcus," I started, but he cut me off. "Don't say my name," he said, urgent and terrified. "Don't acknowledge me. If you acknowledge me, the connection gets stronger and it will follow you too. I have to go. I have to go back to wherever I am. Just follow the rules, David. Follow them exactly. Exactly. You have to." The line went dead. The phone continued ringing, even though the line was disconnected. It rang and rang and rang, past the usual threshold of 6 rings, past 8 and 9 and 10, all the way to 15 before it stopped. I didn't report it. On my 70th night, the maintenance corridor changed. I had been walking it for 10 weeks now, and I could navigate it by memory. I could complete the entire corridor in 3 minutes and 30 seconds, leaving me a 30-second buffer before the 4-minute limit. But on night 70, it was different. There was a doorway in the corridor that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps it had always been there, and I had simply never noticed it. It was small, sealed with a heavy metal door marked with the same symbol, the circle with radiating marks. I stopped and looked at it. My timer said I had 1 minute and 45 seconds remaining in the corridor. The door had a lock, but no lock mechanism I could see. It was just there, sealed, presenting itself to me like a choice. I could walk past it. That was the obvious choice. I could complete my inspection, exit the corridor, and report nothing amiss. The door didn't appear in Appendix B, but the manual had been written in 2019, almost 5 years ago. It was possible that doors had been added since then, or I could try to open it. I had 1 minute and 30 seconds left. I reached for the handle. The door opened immediately, as if it had been waiting for me. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading down, lit by a sickly green emergency light. I could see maybe 10 stairs before the darkness took over. I had 1 minute and 15 seconds left. I stepped onto the first stair. The door swung shut behind me with a sound like a coffin closing. I turned around and pulled on the handle. It didn't budge. It was sealed shut. I stood there in the darkness of the stairwell, my timer running. 58 seconds. 57. 56. I had broken the 4-minute rule. I had deviated from the baseline. I had left the maintenance corridor and entered an undefined space. 45 seconds. I climbed down the stairs. The stairwell descended into absolute darkness. I couldn't see my feet. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but I could hear something. Water dripping, a distant mechanical hum, and underneath it, that sound I'd been hearing for weeks, voices, talking in a language I almost understood. 30 seconds. I reached the bottom of the stairs and my foot touched a floor. It was cold and seemed to be made of something like tile or concrete. I took a step forward into the darkness. 15 seconds. My watch alarm went off, indicating that 4 minutes had passed. The 4-minute limit for the maintenance corridor inspection had been exceeded. I stopped moving. I stood in absolute darkness in a place the building wasn't supposed to contain, and I understood, finally, what Marcus had meant about versions of yourself being left behind. I was still standing in the maintenance corridor. I knew this with absolute certainty, but I was also here, in this basement space, in this room that didn't officially exist. There was me in the corridor, watching the seconds tick past 4 minutes. There was me in this darkness. There was me on the stairs between the two places. And there was me in the mirror in the office, wearing my face like borrowed clothes. The boundaries between them were starting to dissolve. The light came on. Not from any switch I could see. It was just there, a sudden illumination that hurt my eyes after the absolute darkness. The light came from a single bulb mounted in the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. I was in a room. Not room 7 from the locked door manual. This was different. This room was large, perhaps 30 by 40 feet, with walls that seemed to be covered in some kind of dark fabric, but I could see through the fabric to something behind it. Shapes, structures, more rooms, or perhaps the suggestion of rooms. And in the center of the floor was the symbol, just like the one in the photograph, a circle with 8 radiating marks, drawn in chalk with perfect precision. There was a figure standing in the symbol. He looked like me. Same height, same build, same face, but his skin was wrong. It had a translucent quality, like it wasn't quite solid, and his eyes didn't track right. They moved a moment out of sync with his head. "Hello," he said, and his voice was my voice, if I had spoken underwater. "I was wondering when you would come down. I've been waiting. I've been in the mirror, and I've been in the corners of your vision, and I've been waiting for you to break the rules just enough to find me." "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm you," he said. "I'm the version that looked at the mirror during the prohibited time. I'm the part of you that wanted to know what was behind the covered windows. I'm all the pieces of you that questioned the rules instead of just following them." He stepped out of the symbol and moved toward me. "The building has to keep things separated," he said. "The rules exist to maintain the compartments. You have your shifts, the contractors have their domain, the things in the basement have their spaces, and I have mine. But the boundaries get weaker when people start to wonder. When they start to understand, that's when pieces of people leak through." He was very close to me now. I could smell something metallic on him, like blood and copper. "What happens if you stay down here?" I asked. "You don't go up," he said. "The you upstairs continues the shift, finishes the night, goes back to your room. The you in the mirror stays in the mirror. And I stay down here, and I get stronger, until maybe next week, or next month, I'm strong enough to step out of the basement and walk upstairs and take over. The boundary thins. You become more like me. Eventually, we merge, and you become something else entirely, something that belongs here, something that maintains the perimeter." "Like the contractors," I said. "Exactly like the contractors," he said, and he smiled with my mouth. "Eventually, you stop seeing people as separate from the building. Eventually, you stop wanting to leave. Eventually, you realize that leaving just means taking it with you, and staying means becoming it, so you might as well just surrender to the process." He reached out, and his hand passed through my shoulder. It felt like ice and electricity. "You have a choice," he said. "You can go back up the stairs. The door will open for you. You can finish your shift. You can follow the rules perfectly for the remaining 14 nights. And at the end of your contract, you can walk out of this building and go back to your sister's spare bedroom and try to be normal. You'll have a shadow that follows you. You'll have moments where you don't recognize your own reflection, but you'll be alive in a conventional sense." He stepped back and gestured to a place in the wall where I could see the darkness. "Or you can stay down here with me. You can let me explain what the building really is. You can understand the purpose of the rules instead of just following them, and you can become part of the solution instead of being a human buffer against the problem. Either way, you've already touched the boundary. You've already let me through. You can't go back to before you knew I existed. I thought about the rest of my shift. 14 nights. 14 more cycles of going to the maintenance corridor, checking my timers, following procedures that suddenly seemed completely arbitrary. I thought about going home. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my watch. It said 4, but that was impossible. I had been down here for less than a minute, yet my watch showed that an hour had passed. I checked my phone, which I kept in my other pocket for emergencies. The date had changed. It was now the next day. My shift had ended. According to every timekeeping device I had been in the basement for an entire hour. The light helps time move differently down here, my other self said. You could spend what feels like 5 minutes down here and come up to find that 2 hours have passed. Or the opposite. Time is one of the things the rules try to regulate. I looked back at the staircase. The door was closed, but I could see light coming around the edges. My residential quarters light. Daylight filtering around sealed windows. If I go up, I said. Do I remember this conversation? Not clearly, my other self said. It'll be like a dream. You'll have a sense that something happened, that you made a choice. You might feel like something is wrong, but you won't be able to remember what. That's the mercy of the system. It lets you live with contradictions without fully understanding them. I climbed the stairs. The door opened from the other side as I reached it, and I stumbled through into the maintenance corridor. The corridor was empty and normal, and looked exactly like every other night. My watch said 1:56. 4 minutes and 1 second exactly. I was 1 second over the limit. No alarms sounded. The building remained stable. I walked the rest of the corridor and exited into the main hallway. I completed my inventory check at 1:45. I did my supply closet audit. Everything was in order. Everything was exactly as it should be. By 6, I had nearly forgotten the entire incident. It was like waking from a vivid dream that fades as soon as you're conscious. I could feel the edges of it, the emotional resonance, but the specific details had already begun to blur. When I called Garrett that morning, I didn't mention anything unusual. All good? He asked. All good, I said. 14 nights to go. You're almost there, he said. Just keep doing what you're doing. The remaining 14 nights were the longest and the shortest of my life. They passed like a blur of identical repetitions, patrols at the same times, boundary maintenance at the same distances, inventory checks at the same minute marks. I was a machine now, running a program that had been installed in me over 10 weeks of compliance. But I was also aware, on some level I couldn't quite articulate, that I was different now. The version of me that had gone down into the basement had changed something, or that other version had changed it, or we had changed each other through the act of proximity. On night 82, I looked at the covered mirror in the office bathroom. I didn't pull the covering off. I just put my hand on the fabric and felt the shape of my face behind it. I could feel my reflection there, solid and real, watching me watching it. Let me out, my reflection said, muffled by the fabric. I know you're there. I can feel you on the other side. Let me out and we can be complete. No, I said. Then come down again, my reflection said. I'm waiting with the other you. We're waiting in the basement. We have something to show you. We have something to explain about the boundary, about why it's really there, about what it's protecting. No, I said again. I walked away from the mirror and didn't go back to the office bathroom for the remaining 12 days. On night 84, my last night, Garrett arrived at the building at 05, 0 inches the morning. He was waiting for me in the office when I finished my final log entry. He looked older than he had when I'd started. His hair was more gray. The lines in his face had deepened. You made it, he said. All 84 nights. No breaches. No major incidents. The boundary is intact. The systems are stable. What happens now? I asked. Now you sign the final paperwork and I give you a check for $4,500, he said. He laid out some forms and I signed them without reading them. He handed me a check. It was real. The numbers were real. Your things are packed in your room, he said. Your keys are on the desk. I'm going to need them. I set the key ring on the desk. The 7 keys sat there like they weighed 1,000 pounds. "One thing before you go," Garrett said. "You're going to feel different. You're going to have memories that don't quite fit with reality. You're going to look in mirrors and feel unsettled. You're going to hear voices sometimes that sound like people you know. This is normal. This is expected. The boundary doesn't stop existing just because you leave the building. Part of it comes with you. That's the price of the job." "How long does it last?" I asked. "Depends on the person," he said. Marcus, the previous coordinator, he seemed to stabilize. Last I heard, he was married again, working at a school. But he'll never have a normal reflection again. That's part of him now. "Why did you hire me?" I asked, knowing what would happen. "Because the building needs to be maintained," Garrett said simply, "and the maintenance requires human coordinators. We can't use automated systems here. They go wrong. They trigger things. Only human minds, human wills, human stubbornness, only that can follow the rules for 12 weeks and keep the boundary intact. And we pay well for it." "Who is we?" I asked. "Better you don't know," he said. "You might meet them someday. Or you might not. Either way, you don't need to know." I gathered my duffel and my check and walked to my car. The sun was rising. The parking lot was empty except for Garrett's truck and my vehicle. As I was getting in, I looked back at the power plant one last time. The 3 cooling towers stood against the dawn sky, identical and vast and utterly still. The building behind them looked smaller than I remembered, less threatening. Just a decommissioned industrial structure, rusting in a clearing in the forest. I drove away without looking in my mirror. It's been 3 months since I left the power plant. I'm back in the city, working at a bookstore, sleeping in normal rooms with windows that actually open. My sister has stopped asking me about my time there. My reflection is mostly normal now, though sometimes I catch glimpses of something else in its movements, an asymmetry, a delay, a quality of not quite rightness. Sometimes I hear voices in the dark, my own voice, mostly, saying things I'm about to say a moment before I say them. Other voices too, the voices from the basement, still talking about things I can't quite understand. Last week, I got a phone call at my apartment. A woman's voice, professional and calm, asking if I'd be interested in another contract, another building, another set of rules to maintain for 12 weeks. The pay was $60,000. I hung up without answering, but I still have the check. I haven't cashed it yet. I don't know why. Part of me, the part that stayed behind in the basement and in the mirrors, knows that I'll cash it eventually, knows that I'll take another contract, knows that the boundary needs to be maintained and the rules need to be followed, and human wills are the only thing that can do it. I can feel that version of me waiting in the mirror, getting stronger. I can feel the basement calling through the darkness of my dreams. I have 42 days left before something in me breaks. I have 42 days before I call them back and accept the next contract. I have 42 days before I stop being just myself and become something else entirely. But for now, in this moment, I'm still David. I'm still the person who followed the rules and maintained the boundary. I'm still the person who walked away. The person who stayed behind is waiting for me to change my mind. And I know, with a certainty that sits cold in my chest, that eventually I will. The rules don't end when you leave the building. The rules just change their names. They become the things you can't quite explain to people who ask why you flinch at mirrors, the things you hide from the people you care about. The knowledge that there's a place where reality has been carefully partitioned and maintained, and you've held the partition together with your hands and your will and your 12 weeks of precise, unthinking obedience. The knowledge that if you hadn't been willing to do that, the partition might have failed, and something would have come through. Something is always trying to come through, and someone has to keep it from crossing over. That's the real rule. That's the rule that lives in you forever. Whether you're standing in the maintenance corridor or sitting in a bookstore thousands of miles away, the rule that says, keep the boundary, keep the walls, keep the things in their proper compartments, keep the rules, or let the world bleed. I'm starting to understand why the previous coordinators don't last very long, even after they leave. Why they either disappear into new versions of themselves or burn out trying to be normal. The building never really lets you go. It just teaches you to live with it. And I'm learning to do that. God help me, I'm learning.